Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the ANU Drill Hole Gallery. My name is Terence Maloon. I'm the director of the Drill Hole Gallery and of the ANU Art Collection. We have many distinguished guests, friends and associates of Hiroe. I'd like to extend a particularly warm welcome to the Ambassador of Japan, Mr. Kazuhiro Suzuki. Welcome to Canada. Welcome to the ANU and welcome to the Drill Hole Gallery. You are the incoming ambassador and I am the outgoing director. So it's a coincidental moment. I would actually like to point out my two principal colleagues here. Right at the back of the room is Tony Oates, who's the curator of exhibitions here at the ANU, and Oscar Capezio, Oscar wherever he is. Oscar is the curator of the university's art collection, and they've both had involvement in this project. It's customary for us to acknowledge the original custodians of the land on which we meet, the Navajo and Ngambri people, and acknowledge their elders, past, present, and emerging. We have quite a lengthy historical involvement with Hiroe Swen, who has been an enormous contributor to our cultural and artistic life here in Canberra. She has had a very strong relationship with the ANU, and we're also very proud to have works of hers which have been collected over the years in the ANU art collection, some of which are on view in the Riverbend room. I would be darting in and out and often on this podium, so I won't hold you up. I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Mayumi Shinozaki, who will tell you about this very special project, give you a demo of the website, and acknowledge the people who have been involved in this.
Hello, can you hear me? Yes. Hello, my name is Mayumi Shinozaki. I'm the project manager at Canvas, and I wish to acknowledge that Nanawan people as traditional custodian of the land that we are here together. I pay my respect to elders past and present. Thank you, Japanese Ambassador Designate, Mr. Kazuhiro Suzuki, for attending the launch today. I also acknowledge the ACT government's support through Arts ACT funding and the New South Wales government support through Create New South Wales. Nearly 3 years ago, over a cup of tea, Hiroe told me there was a plan to video her creative processes and said she couldn't do it alone. I love her artwork, so I said, sure, let's do it. I have time. And the journey began. With help of Hiroe, I asked respected people to join the project. 12 very qualified and skilled people. said yes to that, and today we are here to launch the digital archive. It is such a delight to be able to work with respected scholars, critics, and artists. Among these 12, I especially want to thank the skilled specialists. Without them, this dream project couldn't be completed. Yumiko Stark filmed the demonstration video. Michael Lawrence Taylor, who's sitting in the middle today, and he edited the footage with a marathon effort, and he also filmed the interview. Brenton MacGeachie, who is today filming this presentation, he did lots of photographs of many artworks of Hiroe and updated the quality of old photographs, edited the interview video. The team of Chiaki Ajioka and Eddie Young subtitled the two videos. Finally, a big thank you to Chie Muraoka, who designed and built this visual and innovative digital archive in a very limited time frame. I also thank David Williams, Colin and Pam MacDonald, and Lydia and Brendan Price for funding the website for the next 4 years. Lastly, I'd like to thank Drill Hall Gallery and its staff who sponsored, prepared, and managed today's launch. Thank you. Now I'd like to introduce the website very briefly. This is the home page that you are looking at, and the first page of the digital archive. And it has separate parts of demonstration videos, interview videos, photo archives, and artwork catalogs and essays. So there are many elements in there to show what Hiroe's artwork means to us. The website is available in English and Japanese. Please choose either from the bottom of the screen. This website has many pathways to move from one part to another. I find it easiest to click the 4 line in the top right corner. And once you click the top right corner, the list comes up like this, and that's the easiest way to go back to where you are when you get lost. Otherwise, there are many ways to explore. And I hope you will spend time viewing this digital archive and spread the word to many of your friends and colleagues. Hiroe Swen is Canberra's national treasure, as David Williams said in 2018. I hope Hiroe will keep on inspiring us more. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayumi. Thank you so much. It's now my pleasure to introduce Grace Cochrane, who has had a tremendous involvement with different craft in Australia. She's based in Sydney. Please welcome Grace.
Thank you, Terence, and congratulations to Hiroe and to Mayumi and her project team and the Drill Hall Gallery for bringing together this very significant archival documentation. And we're very happy to welcome the new ambassador designate as well. Like so many of you here, the speakers and writers involved, speakers today, writers on the site, have all enjoyed knowing and working with Hiroe Swen over many, many years, and we very much valued the opportunity to help document her background, her career, her ideas and approaches to her work. Always good to keep in touch with her. My role today is to provide a very brief context for this occasion. It's based on a longer essay which is on that site, and colleagues today will elaborate further on it. So, in summary, over more than 50 years, Hiroe has been a major inspiration to those working in studio ceramics and related occupations like curatorial and historic and so on, writers and so on, bringing a very particular perspective that was unusual at its outset, and she's remained a significant example to others ever since. Born in Kyoto, shall I say, in 1934, with a family background in textile industries, she first formally studied oil painting and textile design. But then she was introduced to ceramics in 1957, leading to extensive study at the Kyoto Crafts Institute as the first female pupil to be accepted by the particular tutor there, before setting up her own studio in 1962. That was pretty early. It was unusual for a woman to be offered such training in Japan at this time. She was one of the very earliest in the post-war years to take up ceramic art as a professional occupation after women's suffrage was declared in 1945. So she was right at the beginning. Then in the mid-1960s, she met her future husband, Dutch-born artist and graphic designer Hiroe Swen, and together they moved to Sydney in 1968. Then they relocated to Bimbimbi near Queanbeyan, setting up their studios there and the Pastoral Gallery, which everybody got to know really well, in the early 1970s. And that became a focus of good design and very thoughtful working practice. And they had their first exhibition there in 1973. Now, from their very, very different backgrounds, both Hiroe and Cornell had to make all sorts of cultural adjustments to living here in what was still known as the bush capital of Canberra. But they wanted to become part of a very supportive network and cultural community in which they could live and work. And they not only found that here, but they helped make it. What I was reminded about this when I saw some of her work in the gallery next door. She wrote in 1972, I think, about her response to the environment. Birds, stones, starry nights, things like that. When they arrived in 1968, as some of you will remember so well, what had become known internationally as the Anglo-Oriental ceramic aesthetic was well established. And across Australia, ceramics courses and educational institutions have become very strong advocates for the evolving Anglo-Oriental movement, thanks to Bernard Leach. And inevitably, of course, at the same time, there are examples of expressionist ceramic work developed in California in the 1950s, and that also reached Australia in the 1960s. And as part of that very enthusiastic interest in Japan, from the very early 1960s, Australian potters started to travel to Japan to study. I'm sure Paul will talk, and Jackie will talk more about that. And in turn invite Japanese potters to come to visit Australia and New Zealand to lecture, give workshops, exhibit their work. And notably at that time, all these potters were men, and most of them returned to Japan. So where did Hiroe fit in Australia? She was quite different. As I mentioned, unusual for the time, she was a female Japanese potter, and she came to Australia to stay. From her first exhibition in Australia in Melbourne in 1968, and throughout the many, many exhibitions that she's been involved in later decades, it's very clear that she approached her practice in her own way, combining Japanese and Australian experiences and showing very singular independence and determination in choosing her own path for herself. In 1972, she wrote an introduction to an exhibition. This is the one I'm thinking of. Here I am, lucky enough to have beautiful surroundings, the striking colours and textures of bark of trees, the chirping of different birds, centuries-old stones, wonderful sunsets, and unbelievable starry nights. Now, as well as providing a professional example to others through the Pastoral Gallery exhibitions and others across Australia through showing her work, she also taught in many places, providing skills and encouragement to students to develop their own affinities between ideas and the realisation of them through form and surface. And they included, as you mentioned, Canberra Technical College, 71-73, a study group for 10 years from their pastoral property from 1974, their own workshops, and then the Canberra School of Art for 18 years from 1981, which I think Alan Watt will talk about. She was also invited to give workshops in other states, such as in Tasmania, where I first met her in the 1970s. And I have mentioned this before. I had really sore shoulders that time, and she went like this, as if I was a piece of clay, and it loosened it up immediately. Her works are in national, state and regional museum and gallery collections, and embassies and high commissions in Canberra, and many private collections. And celebratory exhibitions have been held in many places. In 2000, she was named Canberra Times Artist of the Year, and in 2006 was awarded the Order of the Rising Sun, Gold and Silver Rays by the Government of Japan. She's written on this website, living in a new country, working with different clay, seeing different approaches of other artists to ceramics certainly gave me ongoing challenges and kept me asking myself, what is my ceramics? The search never ends in me. So it's very engaging and informative to watch this documentation on the digital archival page, to watch what she's doing and to hear what she's saying. It's been a terrific experience to be involved in this, and I'm very impressed with what's happened. And I can't stop myself from saying, Hiroe is a heroine. Hooray, Hiroe.
According to my run sheet, we have a recorded message from Meghen Jones. Is that the right Oscar?
Greetings from Western New York. Congratulations to Mayumi Shinozaki and all those who have contributed to such a rich new resource on the work of Hiroe Swen. Her ceramic art dynamically explores the sculptural languages of form and surface, bridging artistic realms of Japan, Australia, and beyond. As a scholar of modern and contemporary ceramic art, I'm thrilled such a bilingual Japanese-English resource is available freely for ceramics enthusiasts around the world. In the 20th century, Japan came to be known as a potter's paradise, and still today there is perhaps no other country with as much ceramics discourse as Japan. Despite this, the stories of Japanese diasporic ceramists, as well as the stories of Japanese women ceramists, have received comparatively less attention. Similarly, the Japanese government is often lauded for its system of preserving craft through what's colloquially known as living national treasures. But to date, no woman ceramist has received that title. And although it's generally understood that women created the first ceramic vessels in prehistoric Japan, Swen is one of the first women born in Japan to gain individual recognition for her ceramic art. As Chiaki Ajioka's essay for this project points out, Swen exhibited in 1967 at the prestigious Japanese Niten National Art Exhibition, and the prominent critic and historian Yoshida Kozo lauded Swen's vase for its materiality, sense of form, and synthesis with new architectural spaces. Ajioka informs us that Swen's story is more than just that of a modernist Niten artist, however, since Swen was only to show at the Niten once, preferring to pursue her personal creative expression and aesthetics over institutional affiliations. Swen's life and work also represents one aspect of what we might call the meta-Japaneseness of modern studio pottery globally. By meta-Japaneseness, I mean the host of Japanese elements on which so much global studio pottery praxis has been based, particularly after World War II. The influence of Japanese pottery is so pervasive that it is almost invisible, as if it is in the very air that many studio potters breathe. Swen's biography reminds us that this influence emerged through multiple pathways, not only those involving Japanese and Western men, such as Hamada Shoji and Bernard Leach, but also women, and also members of the Japanese diaspora. There's certainly a lot to discover in the world of Hiroe Swen's ceramic art. Thank you.
It's now my pleasure to introduce a very staunch, very great friend of the Drill Hole Gallery in the ANU, Meredith Hinchliffe.
Thanks, Terence, and welcome everybody today. And I'd like to endorse all the comments that have been made about the ambassador and going to country. How do you sum up the life of a leading Australian Japanese artist in 3 minutes, which my computer tells me is 450 words? I have known Hiroe since I first wrote about her in 1980 and have been writing about her work since. I have learned a great deal through talking to her about her work and her philosophy about making ceramic objects. She caused something of a revolution at her first exhibition at the Craft Centre in Melbourne, which Grace referred to in 1968. When she and Cornell arrived in Australia, Hiroe noticed that local audiences did not consider ceramics to be a valid art form. They thought of pottery as being kitchenware, and her pieces were clearly not for the kitchen. The prices for the pots were twice those being asked by most Australian potters at the time. Hiroe found fresh inspiration in Australia and was confident enough to continue her own individual ceramic style. Throughout her long career, she focused on ceramics as an art form, showing a mastery of the Japanese techniques of handmade slab and hand-coiled forms and stoneware glazing. Her works are strong but simple, displaying an extraordinary imagination with a variety of forms and surface design. She is particularly known for her larger pots, made when she was a little younger. Sorry, Hiroe's work is different to anything any other Australian ceramicist is making, and her philosophy is quite different. Even though she taught for a total of around 20 years, she guided students along the path to their own creativity and showed them what they could achieve. She teaches skills and a personal philosophy about the art of ceramics, but she never taught her style. You never see cloned Hiroe pots. Now that she is no longer teaching one-on-one, a digital archive, such as we're seeing here today, is a very appropriate way of capturing her teaching method so that future students and those keen to find out more about her processes and philosophy can do so. From this archive, many more generations will benefit the way current students and students others have benefited from learning from her. Part of Hiroe's personal philosophy is to step lightly upon the earth. She respects people and their feelings and gives thanks for her good life. And her pots reflect this, I think, her philosophy. Hiroe, you have made an inestimable contribution to the growth and development of ceramics in Australia. You have influenced many, many people by your totally professional approach to everything you touch and your commitment to ceramics. Thank you for all you have done. But it's not going to stop there, is it? Hiroe told me she won't stop yet. She has still too many ideas. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Meredith. I'd now like to introduce Paul Davis,
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak about my friend Hiroe, Ambassador Cochrane to Australia. Most people are unaware that when Hiroe arrived in Australia, she was already an extremely competent ceramic artist. And it's not very widely known, but Hiroe, when she was working in Kyoto, used the number 3 chamber in Kanjiro Kawai's climbing kiln in Kyoto, a honour not offered to many, and certainly not many women. And our other esteemed Japanese colleague, who's no longer with us, Mr. Shiga, was honoured by being offered the number 7 chamber in the climbing kiln. So there was a small sort of dissident sort of behaviour by this young, brash woman who was offered the number 3 chamber. Unbelievable. Hiroe, her first introduction into Australian ceramics at the exhibition at the Craft Centre in South Yarra, which has already been spoken about, created a real stir amongst the ceramicists. Of course, the buying public were overwhelmed by her technique, her beautiful design, her sharp eye and her creativity. But for the ceramicists, it came as a much more stark wake-up and a reminder call that there was a long way for us as artisans still to travel to match the level of competence that Hiroe kindly brought with her from Japan and has continued to offer. The paired-back striking forms really stirred the community, and her craftsmanship and her sharp eye for design was something that not many people at that stage in the early parts of the development of studio ceramics really understood. I think there's a really good word that all Australians should learn that would help understand about Hiroe's work. The Japanese word is ma. It's a very interesting word, and it's used widely throughout Japanese culture and Japanese art. The word has many different meanings, and a very poor explanation of mine would be to say that it talks about and describes the space between elements and forms, not the actual form, not the actual shape, but the element that exists around it. And I'll give you a couple of really bad examples of mine. When you look at Japanese sumi-e painting, we tend to look at the vigorousness of the brushwork, we tend to look at the strength and the vitality of the work. Whereas the Japanese eye would be as much interested in what the white paper sitting behind the black ink has to say. It's not just the brushwork, it's the way it's applied and the balance between the black and white on the paper. Another example would be when you're walking into a Japanese tea house. As Westerners, we tend to look at the beautifully placed stones and how they're carefully organised so that you step from one stone to the next as you enter the Japanese tea house. A Japanese person would tend to look more at the space that's created between the stones. And I think for Westerners, the best example of describing Ma would be Leonard Cohen. It's Leonard Cohen's words, everything has a crack in it, and it's the crack that lets the light in. And I think when you look at Hiroe's work, don't just look at the intricate decoration and design that comes in her work, it's the way she puts it together with the whole form. And I've been privileged over many, many years to see this work change and move and find new ways of expressing itself, but always under the umbrella of absolute ruthlessness when it comes to her discarding from the design what is not necessary. There's not one element in the work that she would say, oh, they could have left that, or Hiroe could have left that out. That's not the way Hiroe works. She works in this sense of ma. The other point I wish to make about Hiroe really doesn't come from me, it comes from her students. I've spoken to some of Hiroe's students. Some are still living in terror. Can I give you a couple of quotes from Hiroe which your students remember fondly? It's rubbish, start again. Another quote from Hiroe. Do you really think this is your best work? The student would ponder for some time and respond, trying to justify what they'd made. For Hiroe's response to be, I don't think so. With that critique always came an answer. Hiroe would then go on, show the student what she meant by criticising or saying what she thought was at fault with the work. She never left the student hanging, thinking, oh my God, where do I go from here? That was Hiroe's work. First of all, the integrity and the honesty to say, I think this is where the work's at fault. However, look at this direction, see what you can find here, and you will find another course which will lead you to make better work. I think that when people spoke, particularly Meredith spoke about what a wonderful personality she's been for Canberra and for Australia, I think the value and the impact on Hiroe, pardon me, in Cornell, has been her freely given advice to artists who ever bothered to take the time to get advice from Hiroe, her mentorship, and above all, her generosity in passing on technique and all that is good between master and student. Hiroe from all of us.
Marvellous. I love hearing about Ma as a concept, which, of course, there are non-Japanese artists who are acutely aware of it in their own way, and we call it interval, and people with a very great attunement to the intervals between things, whether they be sounds or tones or colours, etc., are for me magical artists always. Now I'd like to introduce Jacqueline Clayton to come to the podium.
Many thanks for being asked to contribute, and my most enthusiastic congratulations to Hiroe and to the team. Welcome to the Ambassador Designate. We're very glad you're here. I have been asked the most difficult question, and that is to address what I believe is unique about Hiroe's ceramics. With a creative practice that is so clearly linked to the practitioner, you have to ask also what is unique about the person, and much has been said already. I've also been given the absolute overwhelming challenge of trying to do that in just 5 minutes. So I'm relying very much on the wonderful pieces of writing that come from Grace. Grace's meticulous research and care, on Meredith's long-term association with Hiroe and the things that she's written. And I'm drawing from the content of those, but just honing down on a couple of the issues that I think are particularly pertinent to Hiroe. We've already heard about Hiroe exhibiting with Ni-Ten on one occasion, and then deciding that those salon exhibitions were not for her. This is, I think, an extraordinary thing for any Japanese exhibiting artist, aspiring artist to do. In Japan, to walk away from such an opportunity is extraordinary. It's one that's rarely accorded to a young maker, and particularly not to one who isn't from an established hereditary pottery family. But groups such as Ni-Ten do tend to be arbiters of taste, both for for makers and their patrons. So we see by these actions the response of a young Hiroe who chooses not to be subject to the expectations that a group defines, but rather to commit to the professionally less certain option of an entirely independent creative practice, to prioritise her decisions and her voice. So, Hiroe's work is often described in terms of her technical virtuosity, we've heard about that, the strength and the assurance of her forms, and her superb handling of glaze and surface. But I think a very great gift of the work too is her voice and her generosity in that which she shares. Hiroe listens to music with great concentration. She listens deeply and quietly and meditatively. This capacity for reflection and a similar capacity for introspection is a key element, I think, in looking at her body of work. There's no missing Hiroe's delight in the natural world, but she confides to us also an inner life, her reflections on the lived experience of her world. The events that generated her monochromatic series, Turbulent Times and Etched Sorrow, for example, are mentioned in one of Meredith's extraordinary reviews. So although at times we concentrate on the crafting of Hiroe's work, it rewards also for deep engagement with that which she voices. But returning to that form and surface, I'm especially delighted to be here today because I think I was there when this project was first mooted. The moment was at the very end of the opening of Hiroe's 2020 exhibition at Sturt Gallery. A highly respected, well-known Australian artist came into the gallery, looked very carefully at the work, and kept returning to one of Hiroe's older pieces, one of the historic pieces that was there. Hiroe engaged with this particular artist, who asked her to explain how the work was produced, how the surface in particular was produced. I was amazed at the explanation, at the detail, the time, the discipline that was described in producing that work. It was a kind of reverse inlay, a surface that had been drawn and incised and then built layer by layer in glaze. So this carefully assembled structure of glaze was then just as carefully waxed over and preserved. Then the surrounding areas, tiny little motifs, were drawn in similarly, and again they were built from glaze, they were waxed, they were protected. Motif after motif, extreme patience and skill and confidence. Had I been asked how Hiroe had achieved that effect, I would have said I don't know, but I'm willing to venture a guess, and I would have speculated on an approach that was far less time-consuming and engaged. And I had the great good fortune of attending art school in Kyoto for 3 years to study ceramics. Unwittingly, I'd walked in Hiroe's shadow a decade or so after her departure from Japan, but never had I seen a process of this kind in any ceramic studio. Earlier this week, I was delighted to be able to scroll through a preview version of the online resource that is being launched today. The third example of work, called Large Bars and Drawing Series, shows a surface that's closest to that which had generated the inquiry at Sturt Gallery. In seeing that particular work, others may experience a kind of eureka moment that I enjoyed in accessing the video. To truly understand that piece, I think we have to refer right back to that which has perhaps been skimmed over, and that is Hiroe's background in traditional textile craft via her family history and her initial training. then her subsequent work in what has been referred to in all of the English literature as batik. Batik, though, of course, for us in Australia, tends to refer to a particular kind of Indonesian textile practice. But in Japan, there is a meticulous form of textile painting that involves wax, laying down a wax, laying in a fabric, protecting the fabric, laying down more little, almost like fences of wax, building colour and building colour. It's a process that Hiroe applied to kimono pieces before she took up ceramics. She talks about receiving textile elements that were already cut to be sewn into kimonos. Her surface design then had to anticipate and take account of the 3D form over which those pieces would sit. And I think all this is key. For the kimono painter, it's the human body. For the ceramicist, it's the contours of form that's critical. And so it is the unique personal history of Hiroe in its many, many complexities that is, of course, critical to the uniqueness of her work. And I think this pre-ceramic life that Hiroe led is really useful in understanding the ceramic work that she produces and that we marvel at. So despite the insights that she's provided via this project, I still absolutely expletive marvel at how that piece at Sturt Gallery was produced. Finally, I know that a project of this scope inevitably involves immense disruptions to the artist's usual studio routine and a great commitment of time and energy by all of those who've been involved in bringing it to this outcome. But it's a great gift to us all, practitioners in particular, crafts enthusiasts and scholars. I think back to the time that it was first discussed, and I recall that the conversation included Hiroe's greatest advocate and supporter, her husband Cornell. I have no doubt that Cornell's encouragement and his enthusiasm was key to seeking and propelling the project, and I'm sure that he too would celebrate it as keenly as all of us in the room. Congratulations.
Thanks so much. I'd like now to call to the podium Alan Watt. Would you please welcome him?
Thank you very much. Most of the speakers have talked much about Hiroe as an artist. I'd like to talk about Hiroe as the lady. I've known Hiroe now for over 50 years, and I first met her, in fact two of her, at the Melbourne Museum, it was, I think, where she was involved in an exhibition of Australian ceramics. Now at that time, most Australians were well aware of Japanese ceramics, but a very narrow band of ceramics. This was the Mingei ceramics, the folk tradition. But Hiroe had come from a Niten group, which was a contemporary approach to ceramics. And these were very, very different pieces to what we were used to in Australia. And I was smitten by the work, as was a number of my colleagues from Melbourne. And that was the first occasion I saw it. Then probably about the early 70s, I came to Canberra, mid-70s, and I had an exhibition with Karen O'Cleary at Cochrane, and Hiroe was one of the guests to come to the exhibition. And from there, she invited me up to her place where, with a colleague, she was doing black firing. And black firing was a fairly new process, and I was much intrigued by this, and later on actually used the process myself. But Hiroe and I didn't know at that stage that in a couple of years' time we'd be colleagues at the Canberra School of Art. I was appointed in 1979, and the then director, Hiroe Swen, said, "Would you be interested in having Hiroe Swen on staff?" Well, I was delighted when I jumped at the opportunity, and the next year she joined the staff. So from that period, we were very close colleagues, and from a period of admiration, it gradually developed into far stronger relationship, and we became very, very close friends. The period of our 19 years together was marked by some wonderful times and some very, very funny times. Sometimes I don't see the Japanese character in Hiroe as much as I see it in other Japanese. But when she dresses in traditional costume, you can't get anything more Japanese than that. Now, one story I should tell you was when Hiroe was appointed, she was appointed as a full-time staff member. We were originally under the Canberra government as a twin with the music school, and that was the National Institute of the Arts. When the university took us over, we became a separate entity, free from the other departments, and we enjoyed a very, very successful period of having a fair amount of money and a fair amount of independence. But there came a time when the university required all the staff, the full-time staff, and Hiroe was the only one in Ceramicist, to come under review. And David Williams said, "Look, we've got to go through this review process. Can you tell Hiroe we'll have that next week?" So I said to Hiroe, "We've got to have this meeting with David, and he's got to review you." And Hiroe said, "Why? I've been here so many years." Hiroe is one of those requirements of the university, and I'm sure that she wasn't absolutely convinced that this was just a process. "Don't they like my work?" And I said, "Yes, of course they do. But why do I have to show them what I've been doing after all these years?" So I don't think I was convincing. So on the day Hiroe arrived, very smartly dressed in a suit, and we went into David's office for the meeting. So David started off, he had his brief sheet in front of him, and with all the questions he was going to ask all the staff. And he first of all said to Hiroe, "Now, how do you introduce yourself to your students, the first year students?" Well, Hiroe said, "The first day, I take them out to my property at Queenview and show them the studio, show them how clean it is." And, "Oh yes," David said, "I've heard of that. You give them lunch out there and sashimi?" Hiroe said, "Well, sashimi's getting very expensive, sometimes soup." So then the questions kept going, fairly formal questions. And then he said, "Hiroe, if you were in Alan's shoes, given these new times of financial stress, how would you organise the finances?" Well, Hiroe and finances are probably not made in heaven. And she hesitated. "Come on, Hiroe, if you had to organise the finances, how would you arrange it?" Hiroe thought for a minute and said, "I would not buy sashimi." And there was always a quirky way of explaining things. On another occasion, we were interviewing students for new intake, and because a lot of students would apply to a whole range of schools, we felt it was fairly wise to let them know how they were faring after the interview, rather than leave them wait and maybe select another school. So we had this young girl just out of school, very little ceramics to show, not too sure about enthusiasm, and I was unsure. Bill Johnson was one member of the team and Hiroe was the other. And I kept glancing, trying to catch Bill's eye, and he wasn't looking up. So I said, Hiroe, what do you think about this student's work? Hiroe said, when I look at this work, it is very rough and crude, and I could see the girl sort of deflating. And I thought, oh, I think we'll better leave it here. But she kept going. She said, there are times when you can take a rough diamond and with care, especially if you come to this school, you can polish this rough diamond and maybe it will end up a beautiful gem. You're in. So we've had some terrific times. Hiroe, obviously as an artist, is supreme. It was an enormous influence in my work. I admired her abilities, but as a person, you couldn't get better.
Thank you so much. I think it's indicative of the beauty of your character that you've had such an array of heartfelt tributes. We all join, I think, in this celebration of you and what you've accomplished in our midst. We're all richer for it, so thank you so much. It would probably be a little bit trying for you to respond, but would you like to say a few words?
Hello, everyone. I dislike very informal, formal speech. I dislike, so I say very much like that's Australian style. Hi, everybody. Now, when people talk about my work, it's to me almost like somebody else. I'm petite. I need to stand up. So I'm a petite person. And then I never have any great feeling for my work. But I did seriously, same time, sincerely, I did do best. And I never cheated for my work. And then at the same time, my life. For people or friends, I always sincere. Truth, I open my heart. And now, when I was 34, one of the a lady, her name, Lady Frank, she was 60. And then I said, she is almost like a hobby, a ceramicist. But I said, you're 60, still you're working. I wish still I'm doing the work. Now I'm 89, still I'm work. No one pushed me to work. I want to push myself. And half enjoying, half I feel miserable because not she's that not so easy to get high standard. But I can't stop myself. This is my life. So I think artist life is not special, not great. I think any people having a home life, support the husband or support children, that's life also great. But each one different life. And then I chosen my life is for art. And so now this is happening and everybody talk about my work, but I feel I said too much. You're giving me too much comment. But I can't refuse. And I want to continue until my death. I wish having a great, healthy, and a long life. But I can't ask, I can't pay for. Just expect it. And so thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. And especially this project becoming today is Mayumi, her strong will. I didn't pay anything. She did for me. She did for I think it's things for the culture. And especially I say thank you. And then everyone, thank you so much. Thank you.
I would like to increase my height, but I think that would be a bridge too far, really. Thank you so much for coming